If I told you we just recorded the best episode on around the coin history, would you believe me? Well, I think this might be one of the top episodes you listen to. We had Mitchell Amador, CEO of Immunefi. They're building leading Web3 security, but not the boring stuff. They started out with bug bounties. Now they have a platform where they're saying they want to take hacks in the crypto industry down to 0.0001%. So there's no more hacks and we can build in peace, free of hackers and exploits and vulnerabilities. This conversation talks early about his work at Singularity Net, where they were building AI times blockchain convergence and before LLMs. We also talk about Steemit, where he was building a blockchain-based and growing a blockchain-based social media. Mitchell is just a wealth of knowledge. He's been in the space. He has a mission where he's here to attack the attackers and work with those protocols and security researchers to make Web3 safe. Now, this sounds like, this is going to be one of Stephen's crypto compliance episodes. You're wrong. This is going to be one of the best episodes you listen to. As an entrepreneur, I ask him about building, about marketing, about transitioning, what it's like launching a new platform, how do they approach it, everything entrepreneurial. And he even gives advice on what to do if you're looking to build in this space and some areas that people should be building in this space that they haven't even thought about. This is one of the best episodes to listen to on the Around the Coin. Trust me, you'll love it. I guarantee it. I can't wait for you guys to listen, and I'll see you after the episode. We are in for a special episode. We have landed the top 100 most influential person in crypto, personality definitely, Mitchell Amador, CEO of Immunefi. Mitchell, welcome to Around the Coin. This is going to be a blast. I just want to, before we even start off, you're the first guest that I've had on the episode that wanted to know what type of audience we had here and how they should be answering the questions to make sure the audience gets the most value from the conversation. And I think that's an important way to start, to let the audience know that you're here for them and to help them take away something that they can actually action maybe or think about. But Mitchell, give us your 2-minute pitch of who you are and how you got here, and then we'll dive around into your background.
Sure thing. So again, my name is Mitchell Amador. I'm the founder and CEO of Immunefi, which means I was the unlucky guy to start it. It's been a long road, almost 5 years since then. What we do at Immunefi, for everybody's context, is we run the biggest security platform in the industry. That started with bug bounties, which are literally negotiating mission-critical deals between hackers and protocols that are at risk of being hacked right then and there, and saving them from that type of harm and keeping them safe for everybody. So that's what I've been doing. We've expanded since then to cover the whole security of the moon. Day to day, my job is just to do exactly what you might think, which is to run Immunefi and help safeguard as many projects in the industry as I can. Players like MakerDAO, Lido, Polygon, Optimism, we've worked with them all, and hopefully had a very positive effect on the industry. We'll discover a little bit more about that over the course of this call.
I love this. So you were actually, before you started Immunefi, you were working for Singularity Net, which is like an incubator accelerator, it seems, for like AI/blockchain ventures, from like DePIN to robotics to RWA's longevity, all the things that are popular in 2025. Can you share some interesting stories from your time working there? And any thoughts about like, hey, maybe I should have stuck that out, because all of those things are hitting like mainstream this year.
Well, firstly, on the last one, there's always that, what if things were different, if I had gone a different path? But for me, I've always had this pull and this draw to doing something that I think deserves to exist, especially if nobody's ever done it before, or especially if there's nothing that exists like it, right? Just builds up a fire in my soul and I want to go and do it. After it's already out there, I'm less excited about it. So, when I joined Singularity Net and I was part of this original founding team for the project, this was in late 2017. Okay. There was no AI meta in the industry at all. This was the very first project. We created the AI meta at that time, but it was also very, very early. And so the project was quite different than it is today. And all the things you described that didn't do well, but at the very beginning, the dream was basically to create what we would now know today as an AI agent marketplace. So rather than it being, more of an incubator, at the time, it was more like the first virtuals. Now, that was a very interesting adventure because LLMs, large language models, had not taken off. And so it was a completely different world in terms of trying to create an AI marketplace. we were working with things like trying to pass well-trained deep learning algorithms or make genetic algorithms available at scale. And nobody had access to all the incredible LLM text, creating content or analyzing photos for creating text. None of that existed, and none of it was good. It was just a very, very different world. Only basically major enterprises were interested in integrating deep learning technologies into their stack and what were effectively these massive custom projects where they would access a model and the team in order to train on this humongous, like gargantuan data sets. And we were trying to plug in as many of these different AI applications as we could to companies all around the world. Right? This is, the early original Singularity Net pre-LLMs. Now, LLMs have changed the game completely. And Singularity Net was not the main driver, unfortunately. But that was a different journey and a different time. I don't know what is most helpful there in terms of understanding, only to say at the time, you were all extremely excited about building AGI. And that was kind of the broader inspiration for that project originally, to create as many of these different AI applications and then allow people to sync and connect them together in new ways with the potential that could create this kind of emergent phenomenon of intelligence. That did not come to pass, but it looks like the LLM version might.
That's super interesting. And you were also involved in building up Steemit, which I remember was like this, one of the first, if not maybe at the own time, only blockchain-based social media. I know now DeSo is a big topic with decentralized social media. What are some of the things you believe you did well in growing that? And then where's the area? It still doesn't feel like anyone's running to I still don't hear people like, hey, you have to go to this decentralized social media. It's so good. This person's so popular there. You have to see their content. I haven't quite seen that blown up. Is it like their time is going to come, or is there still a bottleneck for people that just like to, be on certain apps like TikTok, etc.?
That is a funny story. So for context, I was the original VP marketing for Steemit. Ned found me while I was working on some other projects, working on a bunch of stuff like NXT, the first proof of stake system in the early days. And he was like, man, you've done an amazing job at this. Can you help me grow Steemit? I'm like, what's Steemit? It's like, well, it's the first decentralized social media application in the world, the first thing on the blockchain. It's a consumer application. So this is 2015, 2016, 2017. But there were no major consumer applications by and large beyond Bitcoin and exchanges. And I looked at this and I was like, yeah, this is going to be an absolutely brutal challenge. I want to do. And so we took a product that had thousands of users and turned it into a product with hundreds of thousands and low millions of accounts ultimately participating on the website. And this is 2017.
Yeah.
So there was a world very, very early on in the history of crypto where we already had thriving consumer applications. Okay. And we did that by trying to build a great consumer experience for our customers. The blockchain thing was important. It was very relevant. It was a key growth driver. But at the end of the day, we had you might think of it as a decentralized Reddit type of model where the users would control the ranking. And this was super successful in terms of driving engagement, in terms of driving the quality of content, in terms of driving value creation. It was very, very sticky for users. They really enjoyed it. So I learned a lot about that. Probably the most important thing that I learned from that experience, which might be relevant to everybody who listens to this call, is that there's no necessary barrier to using blockchains to create great applications that are useful for customers today. Okay. There's no blocker. We were able to do that in 2016, 2017. We were able to create applications that had serious, massive usage at that time. There's no blocker for us doing it today. There's no blocker to a major decentralized social network today, except do you have the skill, the commitment, and the patience to go out and really grind on it? Because social media's, that's really its own game and its own learnings that you have to learn if you want to do it really, really well.
Right. And most of them build up. You don't make money usually on day one, right? You have to build for long periods of time with no capital. And it turns into a war of attrition, it seems like, for most of the popular networks that stick around today. And I think there's a lot of sexier and faster ways to make money in the industry that people aren't devoting as much time as it needs. You talked about starting Immunefi with a bug bounty. Yeah.
And this is just a fun thought for anybody else who wants to go and do it. Okay. I have many times asked myself, should I go back build a new social media network because I know how that sausage is made. We were able to do it from the ground up. And that was at a time when the blockchain operating costs were so much more severe, right?
High,
Like the major cost function, we had a tiny, tiny marketing team. We had less than 5 people at any one time driving those to the growth steam. And still were able to achieve very substantial results. The key missing factor there was low costs on the operating and maintenance. So the blockchain is just too expensive, and it was all a custom blockchain built off the original BitShares design that was very pricey to run. And we weren't able to get to like a massive, probably advertising revenue stream that could support that over that timeline. Singularity exited and did very well, of course, but it could have been much, much bigger. And so I look at that now, and I could think of a whole bunch of amazing social applications. So if anybody knows what like a marathon type of social application is, I think that could absolutely kill it. And I think there's a whole bunch of niche social networks that people are starting to explore, parts like Commonwealth, right? Obviously, you have some of these more larger decentralized social networks that have taken up millions of users. There's tons of opportunity here. People are craving for curation, and token, skin in the game, can provide really meaningful social experiences in a way that most traditional social media approaches just can't. For anybody thinking about it, yes, there is an opportunity there. There are multiple unicorns waiting to be made. Go take it.
I love that. I love you giving this entrepreneurial insights based on your own experience. That's something that we talked about pre-shows. Like, I love this audience to come away with something. They're like, yes, we can still build this. It's not too late. It seems like you were too early on many of your projects. So it might be a good thing to wait a little bit nowadays and let things progress. With the bug bounty, though, like I'm sure we all know what a bug bounty is, but maybe describe, like, in your words, like, what is a bug bounty? Because you mentioned pretty much like negotiating with hackers on one side, but then there's various types of hackers. And I think sometimes those waters get muddied as to, whether someone's like a hacker scammer, or whether somebody's a hacker opportunist, or whether somebody's like an ethical hacker. Maybe if you can break down some of those concepts to level set the conversation before we go on into deep into bug bounties.
Sure. Okay. So high level, when you're thinking about hackers, it can mean whatever you want to. And people certainly use that today in the information age. But when we're thinking about hackers in this context, we're thinking about people who can find ways to manipulate and operate code. And the hacking part is figuring out how to take the logic that you might see on chain, business logic, and be like, can I crack this and make it work a slightly different way? Can I turn them slightly different way into doing something completely anathema, completely the opposite of what the original creators imagined it to be? Of course, we see this a lot in on-chain DeFi protocols, particularly. So that's how we think about hackers in this context. That further breaks down, there's this high-level moral into white hats, black hats, and gray hats. Yeah? A white hat is someone who operates within the law and by an ethical code, typically to protect a project. So they might find a vulnerability and disclose it, even if there's no reward for it. And that is a very, gracious and generous act that, we need to appreciate these people because we just don't have enough. The second one is the black hat, okay? White and black, good and evil in this context, right? And the black hat is just someone who operates outside the law using their hacking skills for their own benefit. So typically that'll be like anybody who conducts a data breach in traditional software parlance, and will try and resell that data on the dark web or elsewhere. But of course, in the crypto context, it will be someone who can crack a protocol and be like, maybe I should steal all the money. That's the black hat. And then we have gray hats, right? The third category, which are most of the hackers who kind of live in between, where they don't really feel like just doing everything for free, and they're not necessarily by the law, but at the same time, they don't necessarily want to screw people over either. They have their own personal interests. They often have their own personal code of ethics, and they could swing one way or the other depending on the context of the situation. Okay? So that's high-level view on the hackers.
Can I jump in there and just say, what are your thoughts on this? Like, somebody creates a game, somebody plays within the confines of the game. The person that created the game didn't think about a potential loophole. Somebody figures out that loophole, takes all the money, and they're saying, well, hey, I just played the game that was created for me. I'm not doing anything illegal. I think like the Mango Markets guy comes to mind when we think about like, where's the line between stealing and playing within the game that was created and just taking advantage of like, hey, the bank had a hole in it and they said I could take it as long as I put my hand out. Where are your thoughts there about, is this like a contentious issue in your world of cybersecurity on the Web3?
Well, I'll first note that, at the small end, when you think about that, just in, say, at a classic game like Roblox, lots of hackers do this, right? Especially when you're young, you're playing around. I played some online games where I'm messing around with this stuff. The difference, of course, comes when it concerns real money, when it concerns real consequences to people's lives. And what you said is another way of saying that, code is law. Is code law or is law and code is code? And the TLDR of that, right, the too long didn't read, is code is not law, right? Just because you can get away with something doesn't mean that you should do it. There are ethical constraints that should be superseding, should be overriding what you think you could just do for fun or what you can do for your own self-interest. Just because the vending machine is broken, right, and you can push the button as many times as you want, doesn't make
Chase
it any
Bank
less
is a great
stealing.
example. Just because you could deposit a check and take out $1 million probably doesn't mean you should, because that's kind of check fraud, right?
Exactly. So is code law? It's like, no, code is not law. Law is law. Code is code. Or what we do, of course, though, will depend on our own personal interests and codes and values.
Awesome. What was before you came in, you must have seen a problem with bug bounties for you to be like, hey, why don't we create a platform or a process where these can be centralized or at least, organized in a way where people can issue bug bounties and people can receive them, where, people finding bugs and the protocols are like, no, that wasn't really a bug. We're not paying out that bad. Like, what was the issue that you're like, hey, we have to solve this problem in order for this to be a great free market and a benefit for both the hackers and the companies that want to secure their protocols?
Okay, well, first, your frame is right. And for everybody's context who doesn't know what a bug bounty is, a bug bounty in its simplest form is just a giant prize for anybody who can find these ways of gaming the system, for anybody who can find the cheat code, for anybody who can find a vulnerability in the system that allows it to be used in a way that it shouldn't be used, okay? And it can get infinitely more complicated from there. It's a giant legal contract. It can be small, it can be humongous, it can be anything in between, but that's just it. It's just a prize. It's a contest of sorts, but one that lives forever. You put it on the internet and it's an open call. Now, the superpower of this is by putting it on the internet, you can access the whole world's cybersecurity code. All these white hat hackers who might want to be able to help you, who could be incentivized by your rewards, who can just come in and do you a huge favor and protect you from a threat that you didn't even know existed. With a bug bounty program, you can make that accessible. Right? So that's the context. In terms of how we got here, I looked at that. I was looking at broader crypto security as a whole at this time. So at this time, I was retired. I was just kind of milling about and reading a lot of books and trying to live a very good and healthy life. And I had built a lot of stuff, as you know. And one of the things I was concerned about was, how do I have assurances that these on-chain smart contracts, how do I know that DeFi is safe? And this is 2020, right? So we're just seeing MakerDAO begin to blow up. We have Aave, we have Compound, we have these early products, and they're beginning to demonstrate themselves, and they are magical, right? If you've used traditional financial products, sure, the scale is minuscule by comparison, but the value proposition to you as a user, trustless financial products, permissionless financial products, open access to the best lending opportunities, for example, on Aave or Compound in the space. I mean, like, that's something, if you're not American, you don't have an access to incredible lending or debt products. If you're like a normal person, you have access to a very small suite of things. And then suddenly DeFi appears and you get access to the world's freest, most liquid, most fast-moving market in the world. This is incredible. This is incredible, especially if you come from a place that doesn't have mature financial products, isn't it?
Right. Or any access to,
right?
Right? You have
Most
to think,
people.
if you don't have a bank account, but you're able to participate in lending and staking and, borrowing,
Right.
like it is, eye opener what people are getting access to.
Right. And it's nuts. Even if you do have a bank account, right? The world of financial products that most banks offer does not necessarily compete very well with what crypto, certainly in my opinion. Even at this early stage, sure, we weren't mature then, but I could see we were on the right track. We had cracked the code for what would make crypto really useful for society at large, which is just a better, cleaner, safer, more transparent, more resilient, more adaptive financial system. Just basic, useful stuff was going to make the difference. But I didn't know why I should feel that these products are safe. Okay. I didn't know why I should put my confidence in them, put my money in them. I had been around, right? From the very beginning. I had seen Maker be created. I had been around when most of these projects did an ICO or raise money, and I didn't. And so I went into the process of reviewing the whole security stack. And I interviewed more than 100 people. I wasn't necessarily planning to start a startup at the time. I was just doing it because I was like, I don't know, it's such a bad problem. I want crypto to work. I really believed in it. It's my whole career trying to build these things. I was an idealist. And what I learned was we don't really have a comprehensive security stack. We had audits. And then we had a very small number of open source tools and a lot of kind of learned skills that lived in the heads of less than 1,000 people around the world. I thought to myself, this is nuts. Are we going to put trillions of dollars in these things? Okay, we need to fix this. How do we make crypto safe? And that became the primary motivation for Immunefi and the origin of this whole project. Out of that conclusion, I looked at the whole stack, all the options that we had, all the technologies that we had at that point. And I asked, which one of these things is going to be the single highest leverage, right? I knew how ICOs boomed in 2017. And I knew that if there was a similar boom in DeFi, this was likely to be accompanied by a massive amount of hacks because there would just be a few opportunists, a few black hats, and maybe a few gray hats, and they would take what they wanted. So I knew that there was a time limit to this. We had to solve these problems and solve them fast. But if we could do that successfully, we would allow and unlock crypto to grow into massive scale. I'm very, very motivated by this particular vision. I needed crypto to work, right? That was so much of my life that I invested into.
Can I intervene? Was there anyone else thinking like on these same lines? Like, would you have these conversations, maybe sidebar conversations at conferences, and people are like, yeah, I've been thinking the same. Like, was there anyone talking very similar, or was like everyone like, woohoo, crypto blowing up our bank accounts? Because usually people don't ask questions until after the hack or after the bear market, when they start losing money, they start pointing their fingers like, why didn't we do this? Why wasn't this more secure? But you're talking at like pretty much the height of that time of one of the bigger markets, thinking about these concepts and what we had to do to prepare ourselves and be preventative.
Sure. No, no, it's kind of sad. I told you, I interviewed 100 people and nobody really had the bigger picture in mind, right? Okay. There were people who had built some cool products and cool stuff. There were a few bug bounty platforms. There were attempts to create centralized versions, but nobody saw the bigger picture. And nobody was really building for what customers wanted as opposed to whatever it is that they wanted to build at the time. And my goal at that time was just to equip whoever I could find who was doing this best, just put my weight behind them and be like, this is a great vision. Let me support you. Let me help you. But I couldn't find anybody who saw the big picture, either the impending catastrophe. I wrote a whole blog post where I go and how I predicted that this past year was sure to come given historical patterns in the crypto markets. Nobody saw that. Nobody cared about it at the time. And then nobody was really building the bug bounty platform. They looked at it and they're like, this is a security business. There's no security market. There's no bug bounty market in crypto. Very few projects use them. They were all overvalued. Why would I do something like this? Nobody believed in the solution that bug bounties could work for crypto necessarily. So they weren't widely adopted or well used at all. And nobody believed that there was a business case at the time for them as well. And so it couldn't build something sustainable. So I was pretty much alone in those days.
How'd you finance it, right? You have to think, there's not a lot of traction coming from your side. Was it a low cost to run? Because you're kind of like matchmaking, protocols with hackers. So you're maybe taking a percentage. Like, was it low cost, low capital to run this? Or was it just like your strongest belief, like I'll invest everything that I've made in the past into this project because eventually it will work. It's not a matter of if it will work. It's just a matter of when these hacks start happening and people need a solution immediately.
Sure. Well, in the beginning, it was all very mission focused. So my concern, and this is, ended up being a superpower going after a market that nobody knew existed or cared about, but we ended up creating a vast market as a result of this. But being mission driven, I didn't care about that, right? I was in it for the glory of protecting the space. I was in it for the ethics of protecting the industry that I thought had so much to offer. I was in it because I was a user of these products and I wanted crypto to succeed. I was in it because I believed in what these things could do. And that was enough in me. So I ponied up my own line in the very beginning. And we just, perks of being an entrepreneur and having built a lot of businesses prior, I just ran it really, really tight. So money come in, money go out. We don't increase spend unless we make more money. And it was that
That sounds
simple.
like every business. That sounds like my business right now. That's awesome.
It was tough. It was tough. But then people saw that. Okay. People got inspired. And so my friends who had followed me on my journey, who had supported me, who had guided me, mentored me in many cases, they're like, Mitchell, you're doing a great deed here. This is a good thing. And it might be bigger than you think. You should go all in on this. Like, give you a push and we'll give you capital. If you end up needing the capital, here's the capital. We didn't end up needing the capital in the beginning, but then as things started to grow, I was so, happy to know that I had such a great group of friends and confidants who would pony up their own cash because they believed in the vision of what we could achieve. And it all paid off, right?
And that's not a story that you hear very often. Usually people that are like, hey, this might blow up are like, hey, how can I get equity in it early? And, how can I get mine if it does blow up? Versus like, hey, the money's here if you need it. We just believe in the mission. I don't think you hear that story very often, especially around Silicon Valley and other places. It's usually people trying to get their money in as cheap as possible to, extract as much value as they can out of these missions.
Well, there's another thing there, and this is a key one for other, present or future entrepreneurs. It wasn't just that they believed in the mission. It was also that they believed in me. And so for a lot of these guys, they just looked at it and they're like, Mitchell's done a bunch of projects. And even though some of them are just so nuts, like Singularity Nuts was nuts. Nobody ever done something, right? Steam, it was also nuts. Alex before them was also nuts. Nobody ever done this. And so they were like, well, the mission's great and that's good, but we also just believe in you as a person. So maybe we won't make any money, but knowing you, I think this might lead to something interesting. And that is often enough, right? And look, I have since then have fully converted to that worldview. There have been many cases where my friends went off to do something good and worthy. And I was like, look, here's the money. Maybe it doesn't turn into anything, but I've learned the hard way that people are what counts. And so if someone can make this work, it's you, go and make it happen. And that's been some of my best performing investments have been things exactly like that. So people,
jockey, trust the jockey, right? Trust the jockey. Hit me with some numbers, Mitchell. Like this is you've saved billions, like millions, billions. Hit me with some numbers that would absolutely blow people out of this world. I think the easiest stat is in 2022 was basically DeFi burned down $4 billion of losses, mostly, vulnerable exploits, smart contract code vulnerabilities. Hit me with some numbers that would absolutely shock people.
Okay. So for starters, when you're thinking about historical hack rates, we're doing $3 to $4 billion in hacks per year. Okay. And there's an additional amount on the top, depending on how you want to calculate the scam numbers. So in the early days of crypto, and here we're just looking kind of DeFi summer onwards when we started having more mature financial markets that were self-sustaining and self-referential, a real economy, in my view, we're seeing billion-dollar hacks. Now this is, 1 to 3% of total value in those contracts being hacked for you. That's a lot of risks to be taken in the smart contracts. Those are the real ones. Now, it could have been even worse. So for context on what we've done with Immunefi over the past 4 years, if we just look at the hard cash values, not looking at underlying equity, not looking at token equivalents or equity-like assets as well, and not looking at derivative-like assets as well, just looking at hard cash and hard tokens that could have been stolen, we prevented over $25 billion. If those hacks have come to life, we would be living in a very different world. In my view, crypto could have been delegitimized. And it could have been worse because that's $25 billion of hard cash, of hard token values. If we look at the contagion effects that could have followed those, thinking underlying tokens, right? A hack happens, it's not just that the money is stolen, but it's also that the underlying token value is destroyed. I did a whole analysis on this where it's like often 50 to 80% of the underlying token value is destroyed for the following, 6 months, year plus. And some of that can be permanently sustaining where even with projects that survive and many don't, you might have 10 or 20% token drawdowns that never really fully recover. So the actual potential damage was much, much grander than that. However, having said all that, and despite how scary these numbers are in a market that has been hovering around 100 billion, 150 billion, moving towards 200 billion TVL, we prevented all of those. Those were all saves at the end of the day. And so this world where we live in, where you feel like these, $2 to $4 billion hack numbers are absolutely massive, right? This is the good world that we're in, right? We're in the Wild West, right? The bank carriages are getting robbed. The banks in the small towns are getting robbed. And by and large, even with the damage that we've been seeing, we've been broadly successful at protecting the industry from what could have happened. This is the level of hostility and adversariality that we see in the industry today, and that our job is to go and defend against.
And you have to think too, like $25 billion in the wrong people's hands is going to equate to more hacks, right? If you give $25 billion to North Korea, they're going to be able to fund some other projects. They're going to be able to hire more people working underneath them. They're going to be able to create more exploits and attack vectors. So it's not just the money you saved. It's like what could have been done with the money had they got into the wrong hands. What was that? You talk about the early stages. No one really believed in Web3 security. You have all of these, as you call them, saves. What was it like as an early adopter? Who was like that one company that like, hey, really invested in what you were doing? Were the ones putting out those high amount bug bounties that really got people to notice Immunefi and being like, hey, maybe we should start doing the same thing.
True. So there are two great examples to that effect. The first big bounty we had. So when Immunefi started, we were just one simple web page that links to other static web pages. We were super paranoid. We were assuming that North Korea was out to get us from day one. And it's all rather primitive. Okay. We're just advocating these things. And the major challenges, like you said, changing the standards around bug bounties, because in the beginning, bug bounties didn't work. They were written by lawyers. They were super restrictive. So why would you help someone who like saddles you with an NDA afterwards and makes your life difficult and hates on you? Like that is literally the definition of being punished for doing a good deed. Okay. So that didn't work. And then the bounty amounts were too small. You might save $1 million or 10 million or $100 million, and then they would give you like $5,000 in a t-shirt, or maybe just a t-shirt. It's a true story. This has happened many, many times in previous.
I'm laughing because I've heard stories of it.
It's crazy.
They're like, oh, we'll take you out to lunch next crypto conference. Well, thanks so much.
Right. It's like, come on, guys. The work it requires to figure these things out can have to be intensive. A great white hat could spend months cracking a single contract and figuring out all the nooks and crannies, particularly infrastructure. So it's like it wasn't matching up. And the first real challenge was to transform what a bug bounty was. We may use the same words as we do just Web2 bug bounties, but in fact, crypto bug bounties are a completely different piece. They're written and designed differently, not written by lawyers, but written directly to appeal to white hats in the security community at large, even great, but they're financially lucrative. This was a key challenge that we had to break through in the very beginning. So you talked about, some of these big hacks that have happened, like the biggest bounty ever paid on Immunefi was $10 million. Okay, that's the biggest bounty paid anywhere on the internet. All the biggest bounties on the internet have been paid on Immunefi. So that was it. In the beginning, we're fighting with t-shirts, right? So how do we go from the world of t-shirts to big money? We needed to crack that. And we needed to make them safe. One of the big challenges is, under traditional American laws, if you disclose a bug, technically you've committed a crime just by looking into someone's infrastructure, even if it's all on-chain and public and transparently. Even under those conditions, kind of sort of, it's breaking the law depending on the jurisdiction. So we needed to go and fix that. And so we created something that nobody had ever seen, which was the scaling bug bounty and a full bunch of trust assurance measures designed to create a credible, neutral third party that could adjudicate these disputes, that could adjudicate whether a bug bounty was real or not, and help enforce payment to make sure that actually happened at the end of the day.
Can I jump in here? Like, how does the money work? Is it locked into a smart contract and based on certain requirements? Does it has to be agreed upon by like a jury of the peers of whether it was actually solved or not solved? Or is it an escrow system? Like, I think people would probably say like $10 million. Like, who had the $10 million? How long did it take to get to that white hat hacker? Like, these are all questions I think operationally aren't 100% clear.
Sure. They are very nuanced and they were very allowed. In the early days, it was more like we had to use much more heavily trust and social reputation to move forward. Nowadays, we have our vault system, which is a self-custody vault that customers can use with some restraints on it to ensure good faith actions to put funds in It's not exactly an escrow system because technically there's no third party, but it's like a decentralized escrow system. And so it's the kind of thing, like to the point I mentioned earlier, how you can create great applications that make sense for the world today. In crypto, our Vault system is like that. It's better than any other bug bounty system in the world because you can just look and actually see funds on chain that the customer has committed for the purposes of their bounties. But the most important thing regarding that is just the law, right? Just contracts. And we have a bunch of contracts that we use for these things. So the bug bounty program itself is a contract that the customer has agreed to and put out there. The contract they do with us at Immunefi is a contract that's legally binding that they have to abide by. And then finally, we have an arbitration system. This was another innovation we made. We created the world's first, and as far as I know, only private court, just for software vulnerabilities called Immunefi Arbitration. And it works with the London Chamber of Arbitration and Mediation in the UK. And the result is we can have rulings that are very cheap and very fast to do that are informed by our technical expertise. Okay. And we can bring witnesses as we see fit. Immunefi is the best triage service in the history of bug bounty, in my view, certainly in crypto. And so we have all these experts on staff. You can say, is this a real vulnerability or is this not? Is this within the rules of the programs? The programs are all designed to be as crystal clear as they can possibly be. And Immunefi arbitration to be like, okay, this is appropriate. You need to go and pay this. And it's binding across the entirety of the world. So we have
How many
all
times
of
do you
these
have to
measures.
go? How many times do you have to go to that arbitration? Is it like loans, right? There's a
Almost
default
never.
rate of any loan, like 6%, 7%. How many
Less
of
than
these cases
1%.
actually reach that level of arbitration?
Almost none. Almost none
That's what
are
I've,
doing it.
yeah.
Right? That's like the Supreme Court level. But we spent years building things. For example, we have Immunefi Mediation, which is the most neutral and credible mediation service in bug bounties. You always know that our guys are going to tell you exactly how things should, right? We're not primarily taking payment on the bounty itself. We're just saying what is true and what is right. And the customers agree to that when they sign up. And then the programs are designed to ensure good faith actions, right? So we have all those protective measures that have been put in place over years to make sure that people are good faith actors. And then you have we have this kind of a ladder of escalation for managing disputes and bringing those to harmonious conclusions.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense. I think that clears up a lot for the audience. I'm curious. I think a lot of the audience would be like, why do you need a bug bounty program? You know, we see these protocols get hacked and then they just offer the hacker 10% to give us back the money, and you can keep 10%, or like, we'll give you a job. Like, what do you think of that process? Is that kind of cutting corners? Do you think that these protocols should have done a better job on the front end? And then secondly, what does society need to do to be like, hey, I'm only going to be dealing with protocols that have bug bounty programs in place, that have done their audits, pen testing, simulated environments for before they launch their code? Like, when is society going to be like, hey, I'm only dealing with the most safest protocols out there versus like just throwing their money into anything that kind of looks shiny? And I could be overgeneralizing it. Maybe you can speak to that more than I can.
Sure. Okay, two very different questions. I'll start with the second one. Ultimately, society at large has a limited ability to participate in securing the industry at this time. The tech changes so quickly. Okay, the nature of the circumstances are so nuanced. Most of these actions take place behind closed doors. Okay. It's very difficult to know what's going on. So, for example, you know, we've had chats with regulators about what to do on the security side, and they're like, should we enforce this standard? And I'm like, man, you guys are like 3 years behind. If we write this into law, it won't really make a difference because you don't understand the whole tech stack that's available that customers should adopt. And by the way, 3 years from now, that tech stack will change substantially. We'll have added a bunch of new things. So is a limited ability. Now, the most powerful ability for society to intervene towards the betterment of security in the ecosystem is simply to demand it. Because if there's one thing to remember, is that crypto is the most fast-moving and adaptive market in the history of mankind. It is a jungle of competition where we are all competing for dollars around the world in various forms. In consequence, we are extremely responsive to customer needs, right? And as a simple example of that, you could compare the costs of a financial product on the DeFi protocol to anything that you might see on a centralized equivalent, and look at the margin difference between these types of products, right? And the capital efficiency of these types of products. Very typically, the vast majority of DeFi products charge zero fees upfront and for quite some time. Then they may give, a ton of their tokens, effectively the equity of these things, away to their users in order to incentivize them. Like, this is the most competitive, from a consumer standpoint, market in the world. And by extension, if you ask and demand security, they will give you security. And that is exactly what we saw at Immunefi.
Right.
So it wasn't just this spate of hacks in the DeFi summer and the aftermath thereof that drove our incredible growth. It was also the fact that we worked with the community at large to set a new security standard. As we would say, if you're not using Immunefi, if you're not using bug bounties, you're not taking security seriously. And who wants to throw down their money into a product that doesn't take security seriously? There's not a single consumer in crypto that'll be like, oh yeah, what's this YOLO now? Yeah, that's a good idea. No, but that's super powerful. That alone is what will inevitably make all the difference in pushing more effective security systems. It's all we need to do to win this game.
And you just launched Magnus, which is, in February of 2025, of February of this year, which is pretty much giving a platform to do exactly that, right? Take this kind of fragmented inefficiencies on-chain security and bring it into one place, one workflow. Can you describe Magnus for everyone and essentially, what makes this so interesting to a lot of the protocols that have already started to adopt it?
Sure. And here I'll try and walk through some of the higher level reasons, because there's something of value here, I think, that everybody who's either participating in crypto today or considering doing so. Magnus is what we call the Crypto Manhattan Project, Crypto Security Manhattan. Okay. And the reason we call it that internally in Immunefi is because if we succeed, we're going to usher in a new age for crypto, because we're going to bring hacks to an end. The reality of the fact is that we have incredible tools, security tools available in the industry today, but they're not widely adopted. And in fact, most people don't even know about them. The problem that we face today is exactly the same problem that we faced at the beginning of Immunefi when nobody used bug bounties. They didn't know about them. They didn't know that they worked. They didn't know how to use them. We fixed that problem with bug bounties. And as a result, bug bounties have become a standard in the space that are incredibly effective. We just had a protocol today, Reserve, that increased their bug bounties to $10 million. Okay. Like, the industry is all bought in on that because they can see that the ROI on those things is often, 100x on the mitigated cost, right? The cost that you would have otherwise had to pay if the vulnerability was elsewhere. Now, we have that same dynamic across the whole stack, right? We have early detection tools that could be used in the software pipeline. Nobody uses them. We have monitoring tools, right, that can provide real-time threat intelligence. Those have some more adoption, but we're still looking at under 20 or 30% of the industries, nowhere near where it needs to be. We have firewalling technology that can screen out and identify malicious transactions. That's sub 1% in terms of overall adoption. It works today. It's ready today. We have new auditing solutions that are just beginning to be explored. And then when we have automations that can be triggered across this whole stack of things to make them speak to each other, that could be, say, automatically pausing contracts when threats are detected. And those aren't being used today either. So there's this whole stack of super tools that could take us from this world of 1 to 3%, right, in terms of hacked CVL per year, and bring that down to 0.1%.
Why aren't people using it? It doesn't, even the bug bounties, you're putting up $10 million, but if nothing can be found to be wrong with your code by some of the top hackers in the world, you're not losing any money. But if you don't put up the 10 million as, kind of collateral, and something does happen, you're going to lose so much more than $10 million.
Right.
So this seems almost like a no-brainer and a huge backstop for a lot of these protocols. Is it just not a concern? Is security not a good, the bug bounty, even not buying tech or paying for the tech stacks that you're talking about? Why wouldn't the bug bounty be the first thing every protocol does?
Well, they should. And that is something that we're slowly seeing to come to life. We are at, majority of the industry adopting it. So we're going into that world. But the reality is it's just hard. Let me give an example, right? You have probably used a multi-sig before, but when it comes to day-to-day use, you're probably not super excited about using some 3 of 5 or 3 of 6 or 4 of 7 multi-sig for doing things. It's like, that would be a huge pain in the ass. And you save that only for when you really need it, or you might not even use it at all. The vast majority of users still don't use multi-sigs today. And yet that is like best practice. You're an even if you've been around many years, you may not use a multi-sig, right? Because it's just hard. And the tools, like the UX just isn't there. So we needed to solve that problem. We needed to take a world-class, the best possible bug bounty program that you could make and make it effortless to adopt. We do all the work. We have all the standards. We have all the statistics. We show all the ROI. We automate all the workflows. Then you just come in, you say, sure, I'm signed. Let's do it, man. Let's go. And we guide you. Here's how you should set the price. Here's the kind of terms you should have. Here's the assets that you should be putting in scope. Here's the type of alerting you should do. And it's all just there for you. It's all just done. And that's what made the difference, okay, in getting mass adoption of bug bounties, making it just a no-brainer that made sense. And that's also what's missing, by the way, on the rest of the stack. And this is the problem that Magnus solves. Setting up monitoring is not very easy. How do you connect it to the rest of your stack? And the answer is, for most tooling today, you can't and you don't. And so it's like a brain in a jar. It can tell you useful things, but it can't do anything. Or let's say a pipeline depends. How do you know which software is good and what's not? Well, you as an individual protocol, you can't. You just have like all these signals coming at you. None of them seem particularly credible. You don't understand what's going on. You're just like, well, screw it all. I'm just going to do an auditor because at least I trust it. I'm just going to use Immunefi because at least I know they're good. This is the problem that you have with the stack. And so this is also what Magnus solves, creating the best possible implementation of all these tools for them without almost any work on your side. And you have to sit back, do I believe in Immunefi? If I do, then this is the way to go.
That makes a lot of sense. You're like the Ozempic, for people like, we all know that eat healthy, go for walks, get some exercise, get proper sleep, and we would lose weight. But to your point, that's hard, right? But the Ozempic gave us like, oh, a pill or a shot, and we could do it easily. You're kind of that, making it easy for people so they don't have to even think about it. But to your point, like, not every day do you want to use multi-sig or these complex things. It's the same thing for these protocols that have to go through a bug bounty. And I'm glad that Magnus solves that problem. But you're also integrating AI into that solution. Talk to me about your AI usage and how that's supporting your customers.
Right. So just to twist that pill analogy a little bit, you'll forgive me for this transgression, but everybody wants a pill. Nobody wants to take vitamins, even though, prevention, a penny of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? And so what we're doing with Magnus is we're giving our customers that pill. Oh, it's really hard to set these things up. Oh, it's really hard to figure out what works. We're like, we figured it out for, and then we're sneaking in all of the vitamins because all of these tools, for the most part, are preventative, right? They're taking care of problems before they even exist. We're sneaking in all the vitamins into the simple pill. Like entrepreneur, like say you want to go build a DeFi product, and that will soon be possible with tools like Magnus. You need to know so much about security. There's all these things you have to deal with that it's just a pain in the ass. But with Magnus, you can basically outsource almost all of that know-how. You maybe have one great developer, one great CTO, a security engineer if you want, and they can use Magnus to operate the entirety of the security infrastructure that you may have. And that's where the AI comes in. And so we can give you all this preventative power while solving a kind of immediate critical problem. And you can just focus on building your business. And that's the dream come true for all of us, right? Focus on doing what actually matters to grow and create our vision. Now, the AI step that comes in is very varied. So what we're basically doing is building dozens and dozens of different AI workflows and different AI agents to take care of workflow change. Because the challenge in running security operations is you have to be monitoring the situation 24/7. You need a guard that's outside your house, right? That's just always looking around for threats because that's how dangerous crypto can be. But how do you do that? Because human beings can't do that. And the answer is you use AI to do it. So we can use AI, for example, to monitor incoming vulnerability. Does that look like a threat or is that not, right? Is this likely to be a valid vulnerability or is that not? We can do things like, oh, that does look like a threat. Shall we instantly pause your contracts and make sure that's safe? We can do that. We can do that such as you submit a new batch of codes, fresh code, you believe it's awesome, but you're not sure if it's safe. Well, automatically triggers are mechanisms to go and red team that for you and make sure that's safe, make sure nothing slips through. And we can even do all that with the basics of running your whole security setup. So we have a system, for example, called Radar, which is just an agent that constantly monitors your on-chain assets and looks for problems. And whenever it sees new infrastructure that is owned by your other contracts, it immediately say, hey, look, we would like to add this to our perimeter for what we're defending so that we can automatically protect this 24/7 and wants to do so. And so the AI solution is all very simple at the end. We're taking all the annoying work that was taking up hours, that was distracting entrepreneurs and builders from going and doing what they wanted to be doing. And we're creating step by step. It's going to take a long time to get them all, but we're going to do it. We're creating these AI automations that allow them to be done in a best-in-class way, better than most developers or engineers would know how to do, because security is a specialized skill, and doing them instantaneously. So just a little touch there. For example, we have a system that can automatically scan all your code and create a bug bounty, okay, based off of Immunefi best standards, which would typically previously take, 5 to 20 hours to create for someone who is not skilled in doing so, and still wouldn't be as good. For us, it'll only take, 3 to 5 hours, but it still takes a lot of work. And it can do it in just a few seconds. That's how we're using it.
So it's creating like a bug bounty that a proper amount that you think that they should be putting out there, just to make sure that there's no, the rock left unturned.
That's one example, right? And the AI has, so much more memory, right? These LLMs can have much more context than most people can. And they can absorb all of our contextual expertise that we have built over the last 4 or 5 years of operations. We plug that into that model, and it creates first draft. Then, of course, we can do human reviews on top as we need or adjust as we require. But this is the kind of AI automation that has ultimately turned security from a difficult manual workflow that requires extremely specialized individuals, a lot of money, a lot of time, into, wow, I get kind of like the best practice response to every single problem, both threatening, but also just basic and about workplace efficiency. It's magic.
You mentioned that, humans can't do this. Humans can't be sitting there at the perch looking around 24 hours. But a lot of what we see in some of the hacks and the exploits, and I think maybe you can explain the Bybit hack probably better than I can, is human error. So how are we going to bring hacks down to zero if there's still that human error element in play?
Sure. Ultimately, human error is the single most difficult problem in crypto. Now, the way that we can solve that problem is the Magnus solution, right? And the Magnus solution is an implementation of this idea of security Swiss cheese. Have you ever heard of this idea? Okay, it's fun. You know how Swiss cheese, if you don't know Swiss cheese, it's a wonderful, wonderful cheese from Switzerland. It has all these little holes in it. So you might have seen this from like old American comics and stuff. They absolutely love Swiss cheese. And the idea, the central model for security is what we call defense in depth. We stack layers of this cheese back behind each other. Now, any security practice that you do is going to have gaps. It's going to have flaws. There's no way to stay fully safe in this world, either as persons or certainly in terms of on-chain contracts. But by having enough layers, okay, enough of these Swiss cheese layers, it makes it very difficult for a vulnerability to turn into a hack or an exploit, because they don't just have to get through one of the holes, the first one. They have to get through the hole, find the gap in every single layer. And so by creating, today we use, primarily 2 or 3 layers, right? Internal red teaming, audits, and then bug bounties. By adding a few more layers to that, protecting the software development pipeline, going after monitoring, firewalling, that's right, 5, 6 more layers that we can add in there. Makes it much less probable that anything can get through. And this solves a lot of the problem of human error on the development side.
And would there be alerts solution there? Like as they broke through 2 layers, there might be alerts like, hey, these layers are being broken. Something strange is going on in these protocols. You should probably start taking a look and clamping down. Is that something that would happen?
Exactly so. And you can have instantaneous responses in that kind of case when you notice suspicious activity. So for example, if you see someone messing with a multi-sig and you can see them signing a transaction, but it's not, a typical transaction. If you had a guard on that multi-sig, you might be able to intercept them automatically, even if you had no idea what was going on. or even if you are actively signing a malicious transaction that didn't fit your whitelisting criteria, it would be actively blocked. So this type of approach is used already very effectively today in traditional banks. That's when you get those really annoying messages, right? When it's like, are you sure that you want to send that out? Are you sure about that? But we can be applying the same principles in much fairer and more transparent ways to protect decentralized infrastructure comprehensively.
What do you think in the future? We've seen, Phantom, they do kind of like the wallet Web3 security. We see hypernative blockade that are more like pre-transaction, real time. There's so many different aspects to Web3 security. But we also saw something like the Ronin hack that like $600 million moved and it took them 7 days to figure out that they lost $600 million. What do you see the future of Web3 security, and how does maybe Immunefi and Magnus contribute to that future?
Sure. So the way that we think about this, the mission of Immunefi has always been, how do we make crypto safe for a world of open applications to thrive, right? We'll do the safety problem. And if we can do that, everybody else will pick up the burden and make the world better with this technology as a result. And when we're asking that question while building Magnets, the key question was, how can we make it so that if we succeed alone, then everybody else will succeed too? Can we achieve that? And that's exactly what we've been working on building. Now, the future of it, right, is this defense in depth model, this layers of Swiss cheese that I've described to you previously, plus doing the best possible implementation customized to each customer. And that's a lot of magic in there, right? That's a difficult thing. Customization always is. Combined with instantaneous and rapid response according to best practices, okay? And ultimately, we believe that we can achieve this, that we will achieve this with Magnus, but it has to be automated. It has to be driven primarily by AI solutions of various kinds. That's the only way to achieve a fast response. And I note that because most hacks, not all hacks, the Ronin one, for example, was not one of these, but most hacks take place in just a few blocks. And practices means seconds to minutes or even shorter, depending on how fast the blockchain is. And that's your window that you need to respond in once you've detected a threat. Okay? The only thing that could ever do that was going to be an automated solution. So the future of on-chain security is going to be overwhelmingly AI-driven. And that's what we've created Magnus to embody. Now, it's not going to leave the human element behind, because only humans are innovative. Only humans understand the underlying technology and can think of new attack vectors and can improve the systems and can improve our operating processes. And fundamentally, only humans can figure out the really novel bug bounty and vulnerability disclosure case. That's just a pure example of creative thinking that nothing else can replicate in this world. There's always going to be a place, there's going to be an increasing and growing place for white hats and security researchers to make the stats even better. But day-to-day actions are going to be driven by automation to overwhelm.
I love this. It makes a lot of sense. And I know we're probably at time, but so many insights. Can you talk to me a little bit about the security researchers? Like, I know you have like a top 100 security research that you leverage, over 45,000, I believe, within your community. Like, what part do they play? Are they actively is this a place they go to as their full-time income? Are they like you, they're retired, but they want to give back to the community? Can you talk a little bit about, this integral piece of the puzzle?
Sure. Well, ever since Immunefi started, I certainly haven't been retired. But most of these guys are going to be part-time. The best ones will overwhelmingly be full-time. They're typically extremely creative individuals. They're disagreeable. They have their own opinions. They don't care being told what to do. And they're very perseverant. Okay. They're tough. They want to keep going. And they have this grit and this grind to succeed where nobody else has succeeded. Okay. That's what makes them so good. You could have a guy who looks at a contract that has, $1 billion, and he tells himself, I think I'm going to be the only person in the world who could ever break this, the hardest puzzle in the history of mankind. And I deserve a huge bounty for it. We just had a critical case that was paid out this week for $500,000. Just one bounty, just one from this one guy, right? He's just doing his work. And that's all he knew. He just stuck it out. He's like, I'm going to solve a puzzle that nobody else has ever been able to solve. So this is the type of mindset. These are the type of people. This is how bold they are. And this is the type of grit that they transform into creative problem solving, the likes of very few people can do. And this is why they have earned such incredible amounts of money.
And like also save incredible amounts of money.
Absolutely.
You've worked on so many different projects, Mitchell. I see the Magnus and some earlier, projects that you were with. It all seems to like combine into this world that you want to see. You talked about you took some time off to focus on good health. Like, what is this world? What is this good life that you're trying to build? Not only in crypto, but just like across the people that you meet in any industry.
Idealistically speaking, I aspire towards being a man of conscience. And I believe in and want to contribute to a world of conscience where people are driven primarily by their best impulses, do good by themselves and to grow and to nurture and grow other people in the same way. You can see the connection to bug bounties, right? Turning a difficult situation into win-win for everybody, every which way that you look at it, kind of a natural expression of these types of ideals. So I think crypto could have a role to play in facilitating that, very basically by easing the economic and material conditions of life and making people's lives just a little bit better so that they can focus, because it takes a lot of work, right? Focus on the best part of themselves, right? Focusing on getting close to their conscience and expressing and living by it. Because you can't do that when you're in need, right? You can't do that when you're poor and starving. You can't do that when you're under constant stress and pain. You need emotional space for that. You need some freedom for that. So that's the world that I'd like to contribute to. That's where all these things fit, right? Working on Singularity Net, trying to create an AGI. That's where Steam fits in terms of creating a better social media that is better for the users and less value extracted and more value created for everybody involved. That's where Magnus fits in and solving, the crypto hat problem once and for all and bringing that to an end and allowing everybody else to build awesome stuff without having to worry, right? And allowing anybody, right? So that you don't have to be super technical in order to manage your security stack or be a security engineer. You just have to have a brilliant idea and be willing to dedicate yourself to it and do good by the world. That's the world I'd like to contribute to and where those ideals are coming from.
For, from an entrepreneurial lens, is Immunefi, are you looking to like, hey, like a lot of mergers and acquisitions in the space? We saw Chainalysis, Altera, Hexagate, they acquired. We're seeing, stablecoin acquisitions. Is this something that you're like, hey, I hope this is embedded in something even bigger in the industry? Or do you want to be like, I'm the big one in the industry, acquiring maybe other companies that can come under the Immunefi brand?
Well, we have acquired companies before. So, we are familiar with that gaining. But the most important thing is just achieving the mission. That's what everybody at Immunefi signs up to do. Everybody wants to do good in the process of doing their daily work, right? It's not just enough to get paid. It's you want to look back. I remember my VP Ops, which, guy named Aaron Castle, best operations person I've ever worked with. And he looked back at me. I was like, okay, so, what's one of the big reasons that you joined? And he says, well, I don't want my kids to look back and ask what I did. And I'm like, I built an exotic asset business. And that's what I spent 5 years of my life, 7 years, 10 years of our life doing. As meaningful as that can be, I want to contribute to something great. I want to do something great. I want them to look back with pride. And that's what people at Immunefi want to do. That's what we all want to do. And if we, for now, that puts me, squarely in the driver's seat. But if there came an opportunity where someone came over and said, look, I believe in your vision. I think you can do a great job and I can help you do it better, I would seriously consider that. The mission takes priority over all things.
I love it. Does your priorities and like marketing change now that like, hey, you have a platform, it's a little bit different than the bug bounty program, I'm assuming, or because you have so much experience of like growing protocols and organizations in crypto, this is kind of your forte anyway. So this is a lot that you're contributing, but I know that must be tough balancing that and being the CEO and, managing people.
It's extremely tough. It's a bad lifestyle and wouldn't necessarily recommend it to most people. There are, other better things to do with
Easier
life,
ways to make money, as I always
right?
say, right?
Easier ways to make money, but it was a worthy thing to do. Look, the real transition there, and here speaking as an operator, hopefully the other operators in the audience, the transition is moving from being a kind of one product or a very kind of focused product with a very focused brand to being a multi-product company. And how you make that shift. We were already a platform, but being a platform with many different products in it is a completely different marketing beast. So how do you arrange that? How do you brand that? How do you message that to people? That takes a lot of work. That is taking a lot of work. It's not done. It's not going to be done for another year or two, and you fully settle into it. And the key thing for those of you who are thinking about it, the key thing for us who are doing it now is to just stay laser focused, right? Laser focused on the value proposition to the customer and what that means, how we solve their problems. Because if we can demonstrate that and make that very clear in our marketing, in our copy, in our pitches, in our conversations, and in our daily interactions, just every touch point possible, the customer is going to understand and you will succeed in that shift in marketing strategy and approach. But in infusing this new message and value proposition into so many touch points, like that's the challenge, because that is a massive operational shift that takes place across nearly the entire stack of your customer-facing operation. A big cultural problem, a big branding problem, but that's how it has to go. Make it or break it.
But your avatar hasn't changed, right? You're still offering, a way to improve somebody's Web3 security. So at least
That's
most
right.
of your customers could also use the new Magnus tool. Is that a good assumption to make?
Every Immunefi customer will be a Magnus customer. Full stop, right? Everything that we've designed has been designed to serve these core needs that our customers are already experiencing. So you could really think of the shift from Immunefi as the major bug bounty platform in the world to Immunefi Magnus as the leading security platform as it growing up. We're still doing the same thing. We're still the same person, but we're doing it in a bigger, more mature, more impactful way.
I think a question that people listening to this might have is like, does that mean that you don't need the bug bounties anymore? I think that would be a question. If I'm like listening to this from far, I'm like, oh, okay, it seems like Magnus is going to do everything. Do we still need bug bounties? Or is like the bug bounties part of Magnus's overall solution?
Your latter point is exactly right. So bug bounties are one of the key and critical layers of Swiss cheese. But at the end of the day, it is just one layer. And we want a full stack of them to ensure that no hack can ever get through. So bug bounty is the leading one, but all the others, they're all designed to fit and connect and to communicate between one another. And that creates new value that we think will ultimately make the world a much safer place.
Bug bounty is the cheese with the smallest amount of holes, the smallest size holes. Is there anything else you're building or on the roadmap? I'm assuming Magnus is taking up all your time in 2025, but is there anything else you're thinking about or your team's focused on?
Magnus is taking up all my time. Magnus is actually, the foundation for something that we think we're not just targeting, getting down to the sub 1% levels of hacks. We're actually targeting the sub 0.1% of the hacks. The sub 1%, okay, that'll take us to like a world of fives, it's $10 trillion on chain value over the next 5 or 10 years. But like the real game, if we want to accelerate even further, is can we basically eliminate hacks as a category, especially where they're code related, in the first place? And we think we can take it another notch down. That's something I'll want to talk about that in 2026. It's going to be a long road to there. Magnus is the core and the foundation of that, but we'll save that for the future.
And that means you have to come back for part 2. Do you think that opens up the floodgates for TradFi? Because there's still kind of I think if there was one question you asked TradFi is like, hey, how come you're not all the way in? It's like, there's still that little nuance of us losing all of our customers' funds because somebody, and then us offering back money to a hacker to get a portion back. Do you think that's the one thing that is still missing to open up mainstream adoption of cryptocurrency?
Well, we're already moving on mainstream adoption. So we've kind of won the early battle of mainstream adoption. But when we're talking about truly large financial markets, right? When you have, $10, $20 trillion on chain. And here I'm talking about, beyond Bitcoin, excluding Bitcoin from that calculus entirely. Just thinking of a world where crypto is overwhelmingly the largest financial market in the world. Okay. That's the win condition. And that requires exactly what you said. So when we're looking at like how we get down to in minus 0.1%, right? The 0.1 to 0.001% in terms of hack value per year, it's precisely to facilitate that massive TradFi movement of wealth of 10, 20, $30 trillion.
I love that. And DeFi Llama might go out the bill. They always keep those ranking of all the hacks and what caused it. So you're hoping
It will
to put
come.
that section of their website, hopefully down for good. Mitchell,
Exactly.
this has been amazing. Curious though, you're touching so many things. You've been, decentralized social media, or at least blockchain-based social media, or working with companies. I was early on blockchain and AI convergence. What are some of your nerdy friends that are heavy into tech? What are they playing with? And it doesn't even have to be technical. It might be, like not the new Ozempic, or, going out to the forest and doing mushrooms. What's that thing that people are doing that you're like, people are going to think this is strange, but 10 years from now, you're going to be like sitting there microdosing acid and being like, oh, this makes so much sense now.
Sure. So a weird thing that I do that I think is going to blow up over the next 10 or 15 years is the hyperbaric oxygen treatments. So for context, it's like you enter a highly pressurized chamber and you breathe purified oxygen, and the result is a dramatic increase in oxygen uptake, which has all sorts of interesting effects in the body. Generally positive. It is not without its dangers, without its risks. So, buyer beware and do your own research. But it is a pretty phenomenal thing. And I can see a world in a best case scenario, right, where the world goes on a better path than it is today. I can see a world where hyperbaric oxygen therapy is widely available in every major cosmopolitan city at a reasonable price. And I think that would do absolute wonders for health outcomes, and by extension for people's whole quality of life. That's one thing.
Hold on, before you go, how often would you do that? Is that something you do once a month? Is it a weekly thing? I'm so into these type of trends, so I'm really interested about this.
Well, I'm pretty hardcore. So I've got multiple hundreds of hours of hyperbaric therapy under my belt, and I could do it several times a week or whenever I need a boost. But that's unusual. Like, I have my own chamber and almost nobody has their own. So that type of frequency can work. Alternatively, for most people, they would just aim to do it for, say, 50, 60, 70 sessions to go and deal with a particular health problem over the span of a few months, up to 3 or 4 times per week.
And what's the worry? You said that it doesn't come without side effects. What's the worry? While you're in the chamber, something could happen, or is just general that hasn't been around long enough to know if there's any deeper side effects?
Well, it's been around for a long time. So, for example, it was much more popular in the old Soviet Union, where they used it to prepare cosmonauts for going to space. The simulated pressure was very helpful from that effect. But it's pretty safe. But the challenge with it is there are always unexpected contraindications. We're effectively flooding your body with oxygen, and that has, serious risks if you're not aware of what they are. So you need to make sure it's safe for that particular person. If they're reasonably young and healthy, there shouldn't be any concerns. But if they are older and have diseases or historical illnesses, there may be things to manage there. And then the second thing, and a constant danger, is just you're dealing with a hyper pressurized chamber. And so, you need to be very, very careful. For example, if you have a, 99% oxygen in a tank, you're just flooding a metal tank that way. If any any spark catches, it'll immolate the whole tank, as in it'll all be incinerated, right? Because the oxygen will catch fire and you'll be inside. So the technology needs to be very carefully handled and very sensitively treated. There are ways to de-risk that. There are solutions to that. But like I said, it's not without its risks. You have to be cautious.
Very interesting. Mitchell, you're a very interesting person. There's no doubt why you are top 100 personality in blockchain. Does that award mean anything to you? Do you look at it and hey, if it validates a lot of the hard work that you've put in? I know a lot of people that's their LinkedIn profile, their LinkedIn feature, that's what they'd have. What does it mean to someone like you who's building on a mission? Is it a nice to have? Is it a goal that you had earlier on in your career that doesn't mean as much now? I'm always curious about those type of accomplishments.
Sure. I never really thought about, becoming a particularly famous person or to have my work recognized in that way. So the thought really didn't occur to me before it happened. When it did happen, honestly, I was just very appreciative. It feels nice to be honored and to be respected. I put in, endless amounts of grind and suffering to go and build Immunefi and do the work that we did. I'm happy with that outcome, but really do appreciate just people saying, thank you for doing good work. And I think the whole team feels the same way. So the award is a small thing, I think it's great. I mean, I think these little acts of kindness and respect are really, really, they're much more powerful than you would think. And it had a much, more positive impact on my own life than I expected. So I'm glad they did it. And I felt very honored by it.
Mitchell, I could literally talk to you all day. This has been probably the longest conversation I've had on Around the Coin. It's been one of the best conversations I have. We have to do a part 2 because there's just so much going on in the industry. I'm curious, before we go, did you see the Solana commercial that's getting all the controversy?
No, but I saw the post Solana, Ethereum, hammer and sickle and swastika comparison. So I imagine it was pretty wild.
I don't know. First of all, I didn't even know Solana was like an American. I don't think of like Anheuser-Busch, Solana when it comes to American patriotism. I think of more like, hey, they're more like TikTok, are they owned by like Chinese? Like, I'm not quite sure. So I thought that was fairly interesting, but they like were hardcore patriot. I'm like, okay, I don't think anyone's like, running the flag up and down Solana's headquarters, but that could just
I have to see it. You sold me. I'm going to go and search it right after this.
Yeah, go watch it. I thought it was like, it was weird because it wasn't overly fun. I think when you go with that kind of humor, you have to be overly fun. You have to be like Andrew Schultz funny. Like, it has to be an act. It was like kind of like trending on some topics. It felt more like, hey, this is a commercial for Trump. We're part of Trump. It felt more like the Mark Zuckerberg announcement of like getting rid of
it's
certain
the new era
testers on Facebook. It felt more like
mainstream
that. Like,
adoption is here, and they understand. Right?
It felt like they were trying to like give their offering to Trump as being part of Team Trump. That's what it felt like. But I'm not big on politics. It just didn't hit. I don't think I wasn't overly offended by it, but I wasn't like, oh, this is so funny. I can't believe they went there either. So you gotta send me a message when you watch it. Let me know what your thoughts on Mitchell Amador, CEO of Immunefi. I'm excited. I'm like gassed up about Magnus. Obviously, crypto compliance, blockchain investigations background. I see the impact on hacks on the victims. That also, when those protocols go down, the victims' money a lot of times, as you said, goes with it. So I'm pro Bitcoin hack and crypto hacks under 0.001%. I'd love to see that number pop up in the next Chainalysis or Immunefi report. So great talking to you. And where can people find you? Where are you interacting with the people that are going to love this episode?
Sure. If anybody wants to follow my work ongoing, they can find me on X, and I'm at Mitchell Amador, MITCHELLAMADOR. So follow me there, and you'll see all the trouble that I get up to and trying to keep everybody safe.
Love it, Mitchell. Thank you so much for the podcast.